Hello YouTubers, and today's video is Data Ninja makes easy count if and count ifs in Microsoft Excel. And before I start today's video, please subscribe to my channel so I can keep bringing you online free content. Okay, so let's dive straight into count if and count ifs. So these formulas are very common in Excel and they're basically used to count rows based on singular, which is count if, or multiple criteria, which is count ifs. And the formula really does what it kind of says in the function. It just counts rows based on criteria. And we'll look at these criteria in the coming sheet straight away. Now, just one thing to call out before I go into count if and count ifs, they're quite similar to sum if and sum ifs, but they're not to be confused with each other, where sum if and sum ifs is where you sum a certain column, which may be like monetary values based on criteria in another column. Okay, now sum if and sum ifs are primarily based around summing a called out column, whereas count if and count ifs are very different, as in they just count columns based on criteria. So they're not to be confused, and I've done another video on sum if and sum ifs on my channel. So that's just something I wanted to call out. And I'd recommend watching both videos, sum ifs and count ifs, and you know, getting familiar with the difference and how what each formula does, and understanding. Okay, so before we go into this video, you're going to need some data. You can either use your own data, or I've got a sample download here that I found online, and this link is in the comments below, so you can easily just go onto the same link now and just pull this data down, which I'm going to do quickly here. So this is just a free data sample which is on a community Tableau, and you don't have to provide an email or any card details. You just literally pull it down like this, and then you've got sample superstore sales data here, which is something I pulled down earlier. So I'm just going to close that. Now I've already pulled down that data and just paste the sales data into this sheet. Okay, now that's what I'm going to use for count if and count if sheets here, and I'll take you through. Now, one thing I've done quickly in testing this sales data is the actual orders here are not unique. So an order can have um, multiple product IDs within it. So what I've actually done is a concatenation here, and this data is actually unique to order ID plus product ID. This is a unique column. Now that's something to be just consider with your data when you're doing counts, is you're going to count when you actually use a count formula, you're going to count the incidence of a row. Now you just remember to test your data around what is unique. Like if you want to count unique orders within your data, if your order appears in more than one row, it's going to appear as a multiple count within your data, and that can have implications for what type of analysis you're doing. So you've just got to understand your data and understand what you're trying to count at a unique level. In this case, I know that order ID plus product ID is unique. So any analytics I would do on this data, I would understand what one count represents within my data. And that's something that anybody, whether you're an analyst or accountant or work in whichever department, just understand your data and what one count represents. Okay, but for this, one count represents an order and a product ID, which is unique here. Okay, so I'm going to go into count if. Now in a COUNTIF, all we have to do is specify the variable, a singular variable that we want to count by. We don't actually have to specify a column to count. Like with SUMIFs, we actually have to specify which column we want to sum based on a variable. But in a count, it's just a straight up count of the incidents. So all you do is specify the singular variable you want to count by. So in this case, I'll just start again, and I'm just going to put equals count if, okay, and I'm going to do this first one, point and click. Basically going to say count if my sales data region equals this, okay, and that's just counting the incidence of the region equals that. And when you do a count, a good test, if you've got all the values, a good test is the sum of the count should equal all the rows. So I've got 9994 rows in total there, and if I go into my data file, you'll see it is actually 9994 rows. So that's a good test to ensure that you're capturing everything under the count, or you've got all of the unique values here to count by. Okay, so that's just a count, and again, I don't have to specify a column to count. I just specify the variable I want to count by, and I've got the counts. Now, something I've discussed in another video is named ranges, and we're just going to quickly do a count using a named range here. So a good way of working with data is to use named ranges, so we can actually call out, we can actually refer to the name ranges within our formula code without actually having to point and click and jump between sheets. So I'm just going to name range this region, this column, and then I'm going to do the same formulas here, but I'm just going to do it using a name range. I'm just going to say equals count if region. So all I've got to do is use my named range name, region, and Excel will know I'm referring to column, region column within the sales data, and then I can just specify the equals value like that, and that'll give me, return me the same values. Okay, so these formulas are doing the same thing, but here I've used point and click and I've had to navigate between multiple sheets, whereas here I've used named ranges within my data, and I didn't have to navigate between sheets. I could just call out the named range here, which is quite an efficient way of working. And I've done another video on name ranges, which I'd recommend watching, which goes into more detail. So that's a simple count if. Okay, now we're going to go into count ifs. So count ifs is basically a count if, but on multiple criteria, hence the plural ifs, right? So again, this will just count the incidence of based on the multiple variable criteria. It doesn't actually, like the count if, you don't actually have to specify a column that you will count, right? Which you do in SUMIFs. So SUMIF and SUMIFs, you actually specify what the column you want to sum based on variable criteria, whereas for both COUNTIF and COUNTIFs, you don't actually call out a column that you're going to count. The formula just counts based on the variable criteria. So that's something, again, I would recommend is also studying the SUMIF and SUMIFs video and just understanding how both work. Okay, so again, I'm going to start this from scratch with point and click. So I want to SUMIF the instance of based on these two criteria. So I'm going to go equals, sorry, I want to count ifs, so equals count ifs. Okay, and I'm just in this point and click, region equals this, region equals this, comma, and then I'm going to go back point and click, and I'm going to go segment, just point and click it, segment equals this, okay? Now that's populated and I could just drag that formula. Now, what a few things just to touch base on here. Because I had a named range for region in my data source, when I point and click and selected the region column, Excel auto picked up the named range. Now that's fine. Excel will just work either way. If it finds if you pick a column that has a named range, Excel will automatically pick it up. Whereas if there's no named range, Excel will just use the absolute reference sheet and column reference like here. So for the actual segment, there's no named range, so Excel actually has actually listed the sheet name here and the column H. Okay, now they will both work interchangeably, and as you can see, this formula still works regardless of named range. Okay, now again, quick test here. There's a total here 9994, so I picked up all counts within my multiple criteria here, so that's a good test to always do. And again, I'm just going to work on this with named ranges, just to touch on that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a named range here for segment. And the name ranges you create will be in the drop down menu here, and you can also view any named ranges within the named manager tab under the formulas tab. You can see region and segment we've created is here. Okay, now within the COUNTIFs formula, I'm just going to code this now, and I'm just going to use name ranges. So I'm going to say equals COUNTIFs, okay, region equals this, and segment, comma, this. And you can see you'll get the same results because both formula are doing the same thing. But what you'll notice is when we use named ranges, we can just code the formula from our sheet here. We don't actually have to flip between multiple sheets and sort of manually select and grab multiple columns, which it's quite easy to run into errors or make a mistake in your sequence when you do that. When we effectively use name ranges, we can just stay on the sheet and write the formula out and refer to our name ranges from the sheet. And this is particularly useful if you're building Excel dashboards, or you have like quite a large analytics sheet within a workbook. You can actually stay on that sheet and add a lot of formula and just work around named ranges, and it's quite easier for things like error tracing or debugging if you come into any issue when you actually work with named ranges. So that's something I'd recommend is also viewing our named range video. And that's it. Just finally, just remember the count. The count is just an actual count of incidences of the variables within the worksheet. So you're not actually calling out a column to count a separate column. You're just literally saying to Excel, okay, count the number of times my variable equals this, or my variable equals this and this, region and segment. And again, just be sure to understand what a unique count represents. So within this data here, you can see order ID is not actually unique. Okay, so if I'd done my count, if I thought each row was a unique order, my counts would actually be overstating the number of orders because I don't actually have 9994 unique orders here. Now that's because the order here, the order here can have multiple products. Okay, so the actual unique count here is order and product ID. So whatever data source you're using, whether it's your own data or your company's data, just understand what a unique count represents in your data. What is a row of data, um, and that will drive your analytics and ensure you can make logic of your findings in your analytics. Okay, that sums up the video. Please subscribe to my channel to keep supporting my channel, and thank you and have a good day.